What made you want to do the film about runners in I'm not sure about the pronunciation.
It's called Bikoji.
Bikoji. What made you want to do this film?
Well, the idea came from a British-Ethiopian producer who was working within our company, and he and I got talking about East African running. I grew up in Kenya, so my sort of childhood heroes were people like Kip Keino and Mike Boyd, who were these great East African runners of the 70s, and so I was kind of enthusiastic about the idea. And then we thought, okay, let's try and find a specific story and a place to locate that.
How did you find the two girls, Howie and Alevi?
The first thing we did was make contact with a man called Coach Sentayo Shetu, who was the primary school teacher in the town and had been there for 30 years and has trained, I think, the 10 Olympic gold medal winners. You know, he's got an incredible record. So we made contact with him, and then we visited the town, and we asked him to, we talked to a group of young people who might be interested in doing a film with us. We weren't really interested in looking at the best runners. We wanted to show what the impact of having those kind of role models was on a teenager in that town, how it changed their view of the world and their aspirations. So in the end we settled on two girls, I think because I really liked the friendship these two girls had with each other. And
they're best friends.
Yeah, and it sort of took it outside running. And, in the end it's not a film about running, it's a sort of coming of age film.
How are they today?
Well, at the end of the film is like it's kind of a sports movie in which nobody wins. It's a kind of so by the end of the film, actually one of the girls is doing quite well, and the other has had a sort of set of disasters which have set her right back in her running career. And now it's maybe a year later, and how both of them are kind of back with clubs. In Ethiopia, if you're running for a club, that's the first stage really on becoming a professional runner. You're paid a wage, you get your accommodation, so it's a big step for them. So yeah, they're progressing well.
Yeah, and it's also a story about globalization. For instance, in your film, in Bikoji, there's a Chinese company building a road through the town. What does this mean for the region?
Ethiopia is going through enormous changes, as a lot of rural Africa is. It's got a very young population. Maybe 75% of the population is under the age of 25. And when we first went to Bikoji, we kind of it was a kind of a mud road for the last 50 miles, and there were sort of rumours that the Chinese were going to build a tarmac road, and then each time we went back over the next 4 years, this kind of tarmac road had gradually advanced until the very end of the filming. It's kind of entered the town, and lots of things have changed as a consequence of it. The town has now mobile phones and internet, and my characters are on Facebook. Whereas 4 years ago there was very little electricity. No mobile phones. So it's really changing very rapidly, and the road seemed a kind of good metaphor for that in the film. There were lots of similar kinds of metaphors I could have used because the changes are so rapid in so many different areas. But obviously the Chinese are very involved in Africa. On the whole, they're doing deals that are around access to raw materials and resources. And the Ethiopian government, I think, has been fairly canny about the deals it's done, but clearly that road is not necessarily going to benefit the young people in the film. It's for other reasons.
A few years ago, during the Olympics, we had, at least in Sweden, a debate about why East African runners were so successful. And the debate was criticized for being, I'm not sure about this word, eugenetics, ägna sig åt rasbiologi. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think people immediately jump to two things. There's actually there's no genetic research that people in Bikoji have any genetic advantage. The advantage that they have is that they live at 9,200 feet above sea level, so that they're growing up processing oxygen very efficiently. But that doesn't explain why the village 5 miles down the road doesn't also have the same kind of record. You can have that sort of marginal advantage, but it actually doesn't really mean anything until you talk about the culture of the town, until you talk about what's actually happening. The role of the coach is really important. The fact that it has these role models of great runners so that kids can see where running will take them, can see that running offers a different kind of life, and that will motivate them at quite a young age to take up the sport and go through all of the sort of hardships that involves. So I think, it's kind of meaningless really just to talk about, genetics, length of your thigh bone or even altitude, because those things happen in a context, and the context is really important.